Face me if you dare, stunted whelp, or do you lack even an elven maid's courage? I thought the sons of Grugni were great warriors, but perhaps you are no true dwarf. Indeed, maybe you are instead some breed of bearded goblin, though in truth I have seen a finer beard on a troll's backside. From Wulfric the Wanderer to the Dwarf King Thurbad Stonebeard in perfect Khazalid. Wulfric the Wanderer, also known as the Eternal Challenger, the Inescapable One, and the World Walker, is the ultimate seafaring warrior. A mighty giant of a man, clad in hulking plate and bedecked in the trophies of his many kills, Wulfric travels the four corners of the world, seeking the greatest and most deadly warriors and beasts to bring them to battle and slaughter them as demanded by the gods. One of the most devoted followers of chaos to walk the earth, Wulfric has made offerings of lords, kings, sea serpents, and dragons to his masters. To Khorne he offers up their skulls, to Nurgle the contents of their slit bellies, to Slaanesh their still beating hearts, and to Tzeentch their dying breath. Dogs of Norska, the bones of your brothers lie buried in the snow, far from the halls of their ancestors. The beasts who visited such craven death upon your comrades come now to feast upon their still warm flesh. You run when I tell you to run. Now fight when I tell you to fight. From Wulfric, the champion of the Zal. In his former life, Wulfric was a chaos champion of the Zal tribe of southern Norska, a warrior born who bore the mark of the dark gods upon his flesh. He was ever renowned throughout the holdings of his tribe and beyond as a superlative warrior, feared for his prodigious strength and unmatched skill at arms. Wulfric forged his infamy by taking the heads of every rival Chaos champion who crossed his path, proudly displaying them for all to see as a declaration of his power and the folly of challenging him. In the violent societies of Norska, Wulfric was famed, and many sagas were sung to his glory by the skald chanters of the Zals. Pride proved the Chosen's downfall, however. It was 2519 IC that a massive bout of tribal conflict had erupted between the Zals and their traditional rivals, the Aeslings of the North. The Aeslings were led by their king, a terrible chaos lord known as Torgald. Outnumbered and outmatched, it seemed doom had come for the men of the Zals, with only bloody death awaiting them at the hands of their merciless cousins. However, the Zals themselves were not entirely without means. Their king, a chosen of Tzeentch, known as Vigelundr, was a cunning war leader who possessed great wealth as a result of many profitable raids, and thus was able to procure the services of legions of mercenaries from across the length and breadth of the Norscan realms, and even as far abroad as the Kurgan tribes. Recognizing Wulfrik's skill at arms, Vigalundr also offered the champion untold wealth and the hand of his daughter, and thus the status of king by inheritance if he would gain victory for the tribe. Wulfrik, though looking down upon Vigalundr as a pathetic shadow of his predecessors, nonetheless grasped at the chance for power and led the hosts of the Zals to war. Unbeknownst to Wulfrik, Zal, or Aisling at the time, the entire war was nothing more than a highly complex Machiavellian scheme enacted by Vigalundr to eliminate Torgal, thus allowing his more pliable son, Sveinbjorn, to take the throne of the Aislings. This would have then engendered an alliance with the northern tribe that would see Vigalundr's power and that of the Zals increased by the aid of the bloodthirsty cornet Aislings. Indeed, the Raven God had marked the Zal king well. At the now legendary Battle of Thousand Skulls, the Zals and Aislings clashed. Amidst the carnage, Wulfrik fought the mighty Aisling king. Wulfrik slew the Chaos Lord, decapitating him and holding his head high for his tribesmen to see. With the death of their king, the Aislings quit the field, and victory was in the hands of the Zals. That night, as was the custom of the northern tribes, a great feast was held in Wulfrik's honor. No man or beast, Wulfrik proclaimed, had fought more fiercely in battle than he, and none, he swore, would outdrink him in victory. Using the skull of King Torgald as his drinking vessel, Wulfrik had matched words with deeds. It had taken 8 entire barrels of mead to put him under the table, a feat that had impressed even the ogres who fought alongside him. Before the mead completely overwhelmed him, however, the drunken Wulfrik began to boast of his exploits. Before he was done, he had slain every beast of the Chaos Wastes twice and personally boxed the ears of the emperors of the Empire, Nippon, and Cathay. However, it was the champion's final boast that brought the doom upon his head. He claimed he was the equal of any warrior of the realms of the mortal world, or in the realms beyond flesh.
The World Walker. Glory and horror to the Blood God, whose rage shall devour the world, an offering to honor my debts.
Wulfrik, offering the skull of a Yeti chieftain to Khorne. That night, Wulfrik was visited by an emissary of the Dark Gods. In his dreams, the demon led him to paradises, necropolises, and fantastic netherworlds. He saw the gleaming towers of the elf folk, the gilded halls of dwarf lords, and the ramshackle fortresses of orcish kings. And everywhere he passed was drowned in great tides of blood. The emissary spoke of how Wulfrik's brazen words had offended his gods, but had also intrigued them enough to challenge their champion to prove his proud words. He was now charged to travel the four corners of the world and to seek out the fiercest challenges, the most monstrous creatures and most ferocious adversaries, and slay them in single combat to prove his might. If he failed, the emissary explained, then his soul would be forever cursed by the gods and deemed unworthy to join them in their halls. He then spoke with relish of how demons would take great pleasure in torturing his soul for all eternity should that come to pass. When Wulfric awoke, he found himself speaking in 1,000 languages, and his tongue had been twisted in a sharp, fluted shape like that of a bird's. A shaman of the Kurgan tribes recognized this as the gift of tongues, and enthusiastically pronounced Wulfric as blessed. Wulfric, a short-tempered man by any standard, with little patience for others, made certain the Kurgan died slowly. Even as he began burning the Kurgan's toes from his feet, the shaman was incapable of telling the champion where the thoughts were coming from, nor how to make them stop. The first test was to hunt down the Tomb Lord Cariops and offer up its shriveled entrails to Nurgle, the god of decay. Thus Wulfric was charged to travel to the baking deserts of Kemri, a voyage undertaken by only the boldest of Northmen, for the desert lay many leagues south of the far north where the Norsemen made their home. In order to accomplish his newfound duty, Wulfric required transport beyond the abilities of a mere longship. In the end, it was Sigvater, a grizzled marauder and long-time comrade, who solved the conundrum. For he had heard tales of a ship blessed by the dark gods with the power to circumvent the greatest distances in the blink of an eye, which was in the keeping of a chaos sorceress, the scaling witch Bagayar, who dwelt in a vast fortress garrisoned by hordes of demons. It had taken all the treasure he had seized from King Torgald, as well as all the silver Vigalundr had paid him in order to assemble an army large and fierce enough to overcome the unholy defenses of the sorceress. In a battle worthy of the sagas, the Norsemen had triumphed over the demons, proving their strength to the dark gods. In the end, Wulfric hunted down the sorceress and hacked off her limbs before boiling her alive in her own cauldron. Almost 200 men had been slain facing her demonic army, but Wulfric and his warband had triumphed. The treasures and artifacts, aside from the ship, he had left to his warriors to plunder. He had come only for the witch's long ship, which he then named the Sea Fang. The Sea Fang was indeed no ordinary ship, for it was not mere flight that allowed it its legendary mobility. Instead, the longship would fade from the mortal world into the realms of the gods, traveling upon the winds of chaos itself, past the hunting grounds of demons and the nightmares of men. The ship would sail upon phantom tides known only to the gods and appear again where Wulfric willed it. With such power at his command, he was inescapable. Even the men of Norska, so used to the unnatural influence of chaos, could not help but feel awed and reverent whenever the power of the Sea Fang was worked. Indeed, with every invocation of the ship's magic, the demons bound within it demanded an offering of blood before they would ferry the Norsemen through the ethereal realm of chaos. The only offering it had the taste for was Wulfrik's own blood, perhaps because it had been the one to slay Baba Yar. Despite this, Wulfrik made certain that with each new addition to his crew, he would feed the new warrior's blood to the dragon-head prow. No ship could serve two captains, and this was more true of the Sea Fang than any other. With his demonic prize in tow, Wulfrik travelled to the land of the Tomb Kings, laying low the offering demanded of him by the gods and holding the Tomb Lord's shriveled innards high for the pleasure of Nurgle. Over time, his legend grew yet more fearsome as he stalked and slaughtered fell beings in service to the gods. It was Wulfrik who faced a giant in battle, slew it, and then scarped its hairy head for a cloak. It was Wulfrik who travelled deep into the troll country and slaughtered the monsters there like sheep and cattle. It was Wulfrik who journeyed to the ancient cairn of Jarl Unfir, who arose as an armoured wight, only to have its bony back broken over the champion's knee. Men journeyed from all over the north to fight at the side of one so favoured by the dark gods, in the hope that they might catch some of his greatness. Tales of a hulking champion, clad in black steel and bones, wielding a dark sword, had spread so far as to be spoken in awed whispers by Kurgan nomads, as well as in the bloody halls of Norskan barbarians. Thus, the fame of Wulfrik grew to gargantuan proportions, and his name lived well in the sagas of the north and the nightmares of the south.
The executioner of the gods. You have achieved that which kings and warlords squander armies and slaughter whole nations to achieve. The gods gaze down upon you. Your flesh bears the mark of their favour. Bah! What are women and offspring and thrones? Dust and less than dust. The rewards of the gods, these a man keeps with him forever. The rewards of love, greed, and jealousy, these rot with a man in his grave.
By Agnar, a chaos sorcerer of the Zals. Wulfrik, cursed to an eternity of unending battle, hunted down and slew the offerings demanded of him by the gods. He journeyed to the halls of the dwarven lords and took from them both glory and gold, killed mighty dragons, and even slew the unworthy champions of the gods from amongst the tribes of Kurgan and Hung. All men of the Northlands honoured his name and envied the favour the gods had shown him. But deep within his cold heart, Wulfrik despised his curse, and despised even more those who thought it a blessing. His wish, for a time at least, was to break it and return to his own quest for power and glory. Upon returning from one of his hunts to the Zal city of Ormskaro, Wulfrik was approached by yet another Kurgan shaman, Zarnath of the Tokmars. The sorcerer told Wulfrik of how he could lift the curse of the gods from him, given an ancient artifact of chaos. In return, he asked for the Sea Fang. Wulfrik, despite the protests of his comrades not to trifle with the gods, agreed, for he sought to once again pursue his ambitions for leadership of the Zals, a position he could not claim were he forever shackled to the hunt. In addition, Wulfrik had long desired to make the Zal princess, whose hand he had been promised, his woman, just as Hjordis herself lusted after the mighty champion in her own right. Zarnath explained that in order to enact the ritual to free Wulfrik, he would require an ancient artifact of the Hung sorcerer kings, the Smile of Sardis. The artifact, he said, lay in one of the enclaves of the Chaos Dwarves of the Dark Lands, who sometimes had dealings with the Norsemen. With the Sea Fang's demonic transportation, Wulfrik and his warriors journeyed to the foul lands of the Fire Dwarves. There, they set out to the great fortress of Dronankul, or Fortress of Iron, in the debased Khazalid of the Chaos Dwarves, where the Kurgan claimed the Dwarven Lord Korak and the Smile of Sardis could be found. Into the Dark Lands. As was their way, the Norscan slaughtered their way through the defences of the Fire Dwarves, the blessings of Hashut proving no match for the unending fury of the Dark Gods. By any standards, the Norsemen had utterly annihilated the dwarf hold, an impressive feat given their relatively small numbers. Wulfrik himself had slain a bull centaur lord, as well as Korak himself in that raid, overpowering the former in a contest of strength and burning the latter alive in one of his own contraptions before claiming the Smile of Sardis from him. However, some of the Norscans fell in the battle, including Wulfrik's old friend Sigvater. Wulfrik knelt beside his comrade to hear his final words and afford him the honor he was due as a great warrior. Such was the respect and camaraderie between the two. However, no man amongst Wulfrik's band could guess how foul the circumstances were that led to the great warrior's death, nor of the fell consequences it would herald. With that, the Norsemen returned home to Ormskaro to rest and replenish their ranks. In his lengthy absence, the Zalds, as well as their king, believed that the Kurgan had led Wulfrik the Wanderer to his end, and had continued on his plan to forge his new alliance with the Acelings. The arrival of Wulfrik, alive after all, notably put a dent in this plan, for as the slayer of their king, the Acelings both despised as well as admired the inescapable one. But Sweinbjorn, a mere mortal man, could not hope to match a warrior blessed with the mark of the Norscan gods, and so refrained from challenging Wulfrik to battle, even with all his hussars backing him. Realizing that he could not overcome Wulfric in an honest contest of arms, he instead resolved to find someone else who could. The next day, Sweinbjorn challenged Wulfric to personal combat within the Wolf Forest, a great arena the Zalts had built in his honor, and where he screened potential recruits for his warband in lethal combat. However, when Wulfric arrived, he found that he was not to do battle with Sweinbjorn himself, but a fellow champion of chaos, a warrior who towered over even Wulfric, troll-like in stature, clad in blackened steel and bearing a massive demon axe encrusted with hissing runes of the Dark Tongue, the language of demons and sorcerers. Yet, despite the apparent favor of the gods, the warrior was more akin to a maddened hound than a man, and Wulfric was appalled to learn that this creature was one's Freyr, a mighty champion of the gods and war chief of the Acelings, who, as was the customs of the Acelings, led his fellow tribesmen to slaughter the Kurgan tribes of the east and even pillaged and plundered the domains of the Beastkin. A hero throughout all of Norsca, Wulfric could not believe that the animal before him was the same man when he roared the name in a bestial battle cry. The Forsaken Chaos Champion was a daunting foe, but Wulfric had slain giants and demons like cattle, and no man set against him could ever be his equal in battle. Wulfric hacked off one of Freyr's arms, but from the bloody stump a great spike of bone and meat erupted. When he struck him again, tentacles slithered out rather than blood. The hero's sword clashed with the mutant's great claws, locked in a terrible battle until Wulfric drove the Forsaken off the platform of the Wolf Forest down upon the spikes below, and then clove through his black warhelm and split his skull in two. No man among Sweinbjorn's hussars troubled Wulfric after that, for not a one of them had not borne witness to Freyr's monstrous ability in battle many times before, and the prospect of facing a warrior powerful enough to defeat the fallen Chaos Lord was nothing short of suicide. Ulthuan. Their newest plan to slay the champion having failed, Vigelunder and Sweinbjorn conspired to instead kill Wulfric with craft and cunning. Vigelunder had manipulated Wulfric into killing Torgald to pave the way for this new alliance, but the warrior persisted as a thorn in his side. To accomplish this, Vigelunder enticed one of Wulfric's warriors, a marauder known as Bruendulf, to slay the champion when he least expected. Meanwhile, Wulfric and the rest of his followers readied themselves to journey to the far-off land of the High Elves, known as Ulthuan in the lands of civilized men, but as Alfheim in the tongue of Norsca. A voyage only attempted by the boldest Northmen, such as Eric Redax or Magnus the Mad, and always ending in ruin for all of them. Still, the World Walker would not be denied, and led his Chaos Warriors to the shores of that enchanted place. Only there, Zarnath claimed, could he summon the magical powers necessary to free Wulfric from his curse. However, the Kurgan's true nature would be revealed in that place. When they made landfall on the shores of Kotik, Wulfrik and his followers happened upon a group of elf maidens praying at a monolith. Zarnath warned the Norsemen that the maids were actually witches and were calling upon strange, arcane forces to smite the invaders and convince them to kill them. With the dark abandon of their race, the Norskans fell upon the defenseless elves and slaughtered them gleefully. As the carnage abated, Zarnath mocked the barbarians for their bloodthirsty ways, revealing that the elf women were not mages, but merely wives who had come to pray to Isha for fertility. He gloated of the horrible vengeance the menfolk of Ulthuan would visit upon them for this act. Zarnath had never intended to free Wulfrik of his curse, only to see him dead in either the lands of the Chaos Dwarfs or the High Elves. The deceitful sorcerer disappeared from the scene before the Wanderer could make him suffer for his betrayal, but not before alerting almost every warrior in Kotik to their presence. The Norskans were then set upon by the Silver Helms and Elven Bowmen. Outnumbered, they nonetheless stood their ground and drove the elves back, denying them vengeance for a time. The elves had thought that Wulfrik and his warriors would be as easily vanquished as the horde of Eric Redax, but the World Walker was made of sterner stuff than the vanquished king. Wulfrik even defeated one of the great pale merworms of Ulthuan. However, the Sea Fang was smashed to kindling. But the true power of the ship was never in its oars or hull, but in its figurehead, where the demon magic bound to it was kept. Using the power of the figurehead, Wulfrik and the only survivor of his band, Brondulf, managed to escape Ulthuan. Whilst travelling the border realm, Brondulf revealed to Wulfrik the scale of Vigalunder's treachery and confessed his part in his plans. Incensed, the champion nonetheless offered a truce with Brondulf until their mutual enemies, Zarnath chief among them, were slain. Vengeance. When the mists parted, the Northmen found themselves in the Empire, for it was here that Zarnath had fled to. He was no tribesman of the East, but rather a mage of one of the colleges of magic. With the true nature of his enemy revealed to him, Wulfrik travelled back to Ormskaro to muster such a fleet that would destroy the city Zarnath had fled to. When he reached the great tower of Ormfell, Wulfrik cornered Sweinbjorn and brutally beat the Aisling prince towards an inch of death for his part in the deceit and trickery that had cost him his warriors, and also for forcing himself upon the Zal princess Hjordis, whom Wulfrik then repudiated for her weakness in allowing herself to be forced upon. As Wulfrik prepared to slit Sweinbjorn's throat, Vigalunder came upon the scene with a retinue of iron-clad warriors and begged Wulfrik to spare his life, fearing the retribution of the Aislings should one of their chieftains die. Wulfrik, now having leverage over the king, told Vigelunder of his plan to plunder far into the Empire, using the Sea Fang's power to spirit the Northmen beyond the defences of Marienburg and Nordland. Intrigued by the proposal, Vigelunder agreed, though under the agreement that Wulfric would abandon all designs on the kingship of the Zals. Wulfric agreed, swearing on the axe of corn, and the Norsemen set about rebuilding the Sea Fang using the wood of the ancient troll tree, a horrific remnant of the age from before Norska settling by the Norsi in ancient times. With the Sea Fang now rebuilt into perhaps one of the mightiest vessels of chaos, Norsemen mustered from every tribe to join in this great raid. The Norsemen soon arrived in Reichland, at the city of Visborg, where Zarnath, known actually as Ludwig Stossel of the Celestial Order, who foresaw his death at Wulfric's hand, had fled to. Ludwig foresaw his own demise, and thus went to great lengths to ensure the death of the Chaos Champion. And yet, wherever he sent him to, the champion only returned stronger than ever, howling the name of Khorne, the Norscan god of battles. The Norse warriors butchered their way through the meager defences of the Southling city in berserk rage. Wulfric did battle with and defeated a powerful warrior priest of Sigmar in the siege, thus proving the supremacy of the dark gods of the north over the gods of the south. The Baron of Visborg was also slain, as was his wife, and the entire city was put to the torch and plundered of riches. Wulfric cornered Stossel in his tower, recognizing the azure glow of his eyes, and fought through all his constructs in order to reach him. The Norseman then subjected Stossel to the torturous death of the Blood Raven, in retribution for the scale of his deceit. His vengeance reaped, Wulfric still had other debts to pay. Unfinished business. Wulfric saw to Prince Sweinbjorn II. The Aisling had attempted to bribe Wulfric's men into betraying him, promising them a portion of the captured treasure. Wulfric, having no need for gold, promised his men everything in the Sea Fang's hold to help him in his own deceit. Wulfric explained to the trembling prince how he would cut off the chain links connecting most of the other longships to the Sea Fang, abandoning them there while the Sea Fang took to the realm of chaos. Flying Sweinbjorn's banner on the ship, the tribes would blame Sweinbjorn, not Wulfric, for the betrayal, thus damning the prince's name for all eternity. Sweinbjorn begged Wulfric to leave him his honor, accepting whatever tortures Wulfric sought to inflict on him, but the champion was not receptive. To cap off the revenge, Wulfric utilized another torture to kill the prince, putting a snake down his throat while he screamed for mercy. When Wulfric returned to Ormskaro, he threw Sweinbjorn's severed head at Vingelunder's feet, his features swollen by the venom of the snake, and spoke of how he had left the warriors in the lands of the Empire. Vigelunder was shocked, The tribes would now surely descend upon him, demanding vengeance for the death and betrayal of their kinsmen. The king pleaded to Wulfric to aid him again, begging forgiveness for trying to cheat him. But Wulfric laughed at the king's pathetic mewling and strode from the hall, his imagination swimming with the sight of Ormskaro burning and Vigalunder dying a terrible death at the hands of the chieftains of the other clans. Vigalunder desperately reminded him of Hjordis, but to no avail. He could not have fathomed that Wulfric had already butchered her before speaking to him. Thus did Ormskaro, legendary seat of the Zal tribes, fall into ruin and destruction. Ironically, by the hand of the man the Zals had reckoned as one of their greatest heroes. This entire adventure had also served to reveal to Wulfric the truth of his fate, that his curse was in fact a blessing. Without the power of the Seafang, he could not have entrapped schemers such as Vigalunder and Sweinbjörn. Without his fame as the Worldwalker, he could not have gained the loyalty of men. Without the lies of Zarnath, the pieces would not have come together. The gods had helped him exact vengeance, and with his faith restored, he would serve them for all eternity as their huntsman. There would be no more attempts to escape his doom as Wulfric traveled the world, laying low the offerings demanded of him by his gods. Now truly he became the Chaos God's most devout servant, and felt their power coursing through him.
Throughout our lives, we are each of us many men. At times, the gods conspire to destroy one of these selves without killing the body. When that happens, a new self arises to command the flesh.
From Agnar, a Chaos Sorcerer. Since then, Wulfric has embraced his exile, accepting the honorable charge the Norscan gods have given him. He now ranges throughout the world as their will directs him, and continues to challenge the mightiest beings of the old world to battle. Throughout his unending hunt, Wulfric has never been bested in battle, and many are the men of Norska and Kurgan who eagerly come to his banner, eager to fight alongside him to catch a measure of his glory. He has fought many times in the armies of chaos, for at times the offering he is commanded to strike down may be found amidst the ranks of the hosts of the faithless South. Lords and paupers alike cannot escape the World Walker, for he is merciless, killing without compunction, and taking pride in all his killings. As the gods have decreed, thus it shall ever be. On at least 2 separate occasions, Wulfric fought and killed Count Mordrek the Damned.
His personality. If it is a choice between arrows in my belly or a knife in my back, I charge the bowmen and damn their sires with my dying breath.
From Wulfric the Wanderer. When he first received the gift of tongues, Wulfric was a jaded, blasphemous warrior, resenting the gods he had once honored for tearing him away from the pleasures of the worlds of men. After the slaying of his enemies, however, Wulfric gradually came to better understand the gods' will and realized, as all other men of Norsca had said, that the favor they had bestowed upon him was for his betterment. Realizing at last that the gods had only aided him throughout his life, Wulfric dedicated himself solely to them, fully embracing his role as the inescapable one. Wulfric, as befits a Chaos champion, is a bloodthirsty savage who delights in suffering and destruction and is infuriated by the weakness and cowardice of lesser men. Barbarous, warlike, and devoted to chaos in all its forms, Wulfric holds those who do not bend knee to the northern gods in contempt and enjoys annihilating them and obliterating all that they hold dear. He is cruel and does not forget slights against his honor, but is possessed of a savage code of conduct and forms a rough sort of brotherhood with those he finds worthy. To those who earn such brotherhood, Wulfric is a heroic and inspirational leader, and none can deny his keen tactical sense, nor the fire of leadership that burns in his hooded eyes. Wulfric possesses a caustic wit and a gift for wordplay. He is an unforgivable boaster, but to his credit, the majority of his boasts are mostly the unvarnished truth.
His abilities. Many men would envy the favor the gods have given you.
From Sigvater, a Chaos Marauder. Wulfric is perhaps one of the mightiest warriors in all the old world, with unsurpassed strength and incredible swordplay, as his many displayed trophies no doubt indicate. His skills are such that he can match almost any warrior in the world in a contest of arms. His agility and dexterity are also comparable to his raw physical power, and he is able to move and strike at lightning speeds. A highly experienced combatant, his instincts and tactical mastery have been forged in the crucible of 1,000 battles. He has overcome countless monstrosities in contests of brute strength and warrior skill, such as a bull centaur lord, a Yi-Ti chieftain, rival chaos champions, a debased forsaken, giants, and a mer-worm. Wulfric possesses the gift of tongues, which allows him to issue an irrefusable challenge to any creature in their own language. The gift does not merely allow Wulfric to speak any language, but allows his words to strike into a creature's very being and compel them to fight him. Combined with the well-known Norscan aptitude for biting, albeit unsubtle, insults, Wulfric is able to goad his enemies into a reckless fury where they are more likely to make fatal mistakes for him to exploit, thus ensuring his victory in battle all the more. Like many Chaos champions, Wulfric is clad in an unholy and near impenetrable suit of Chaos armor.
The end.